The impossible golf ball cage. How do we get a golf ball in there without breaking it or cutting it? Well, that's what I'm going to be showing you in today's episode. We're going to make one of these golf ball cages for a couple of reasons. Well, one, they are a very easy project to make. Two, it's a very cheap thing to make. And that leads me on to number three, which is brilliant. It's a great project to actually sell. It's a puzzle, it's intriguing, that can be customized for things like Father's Day. So it's definitely the type of thing that you want to be selling. And in terms of CNC, it is a great way to get into multi-sided machining, as I say, because it is a very easy project. But the first thing we need to do is take a look at what material we're using for this project. Now, in terms of our material, there are two things we need to take into consideration. First is the type of wood we are using, and the second is the size of the material. So let's start with the type. This is just basic softwood, some pine. Now the reason for this is later on we've got to try and make this wood flex and bend, and this works better with softwood. You can use hardwood, but it will make your life easier, and also pine is cheaper, so as I say, it just helps to make this a more profitable item. Now in terms of the size, you basically need this to be square stock. This is 45mm by 45mm, or 1.75" by 1.75", and in terms of the length of it, you don't want it to be any less than around 1200mm, so 4 inches and 3/4 on the length of it. It can be longer, but as I say, you don't want it to be shorter than that. So now we know the size of the wood that we are working with, let's jump onto the computer and I can show you how to draw this out. So we're in our software, Carveco Maker. We're going to come up to new model. You can see my measurements are already in place. 120mm on the width, that's 4 3/4 inches, and 45mm on the height, that is 1 3/4 inches. The origin for the job needs to be the center, so we're going to click OK, generate the new model. Now in terms of drawing the shape that we need in the center of this is very easy to do. We're going to come over to the square tool. We're going to make sure it's on rectangle, come to the size, and we want the width of this to be 90mm, or 3.5 inches. We want the height of this to be 31.5mm, or 1.25 inches. Now in terms of the radius, we basically need this to be half of the height. So for ease, I'm just going to make this 15.5. And in inches, that is 0.61 inches. Center point set as 0, 0, so it's in the dead center of the model, and we'll click create to generate this. Now obviously Carveco Maker has rounded corners as a facility. If you do not have that option, let me show you an alternative way to generate this same shape. I'm going to come to edit and just paste in a drawing from a model I did earlier, but what we can see is this shape is basically just two circles with a rectangle in the middle. So this is one way that you can draw it out, and then just merge all of that into one shape and you get the same oval that we have here. So I'll delete that out the way now, and we'll get back to generating the toolpath. We'll select the item, come up to toolpaths, and then we're going to come down to the area clearance tool. Now the start depth is 0, which is the top of the material, and we want the finish depth to be half of the material. So in my case, half is 22.5mm, so we want that to be 23mm, so just cut over half of the depth. Now in terms of inches, that will be 0.9 or 0.91. Now I don't need to do anything on the allowances or the final tool allowance. We'll come down to the tool list, and we are going to add in the downtown Jenny, the 1/4 inch downtown Jenny. We will select that. Now in terms of the speeds and feeds, as I say, I'm going to skip over this as I usually do, because this is all relevant and dependent to your machine. But obviously we are cutting softwood at the moment, so you can afford to take things a little bit faster, as I say, because it's a softer material. Now in terms of the tool clearance strategy, I'm going to select offset, and I want it to work from the center outwards. So I'm going to leave it on climb, leave it on inside, and it will start in the middle right here and work its way out. Now I'm going to come down to ramping and turn ramping on. These are my default settings: max angle of 20 degrees, max length of 5mm, and a start height of 1mm. So this basically means that it will ramp into the material, but it will actually do it pretty quick, not wasting too much time. In terms of the machine safe height, I normally leave it somewhere between 5 and 10mm. Now material thickness, we're going to put this to 45mm, or 1.75 inches if you're working in Imperial, and we want the Z0 to be at the top of the material. We're going to click OK, and ultimately now what we can do is give the toolpath a name. Let's call this Oval Downtown Jenny, and we'll click calculate. and do all the toolpath work. Now, whilst this is a relatively simple toolpath, it's always good practice to simulate the model, and we can see that it's taken the middle out of that. Now, you have to use your imagination at this point. We're going to run the same job on 4 different sides, so as we go round and run the same job each time, they will start to overlap and ultimately cut through the entire center of this piece of material. Now, I mentioned at the start about customizing these. You could use something like the Groovy Jenny to engrave a message on the end. You can even extend the length but leave the oval the same length to give you more space to write a message. But obviously we know that this is looking how we need it to, so the next step to do is to export our toolpaths. Now, I use Gerbil, so I'm going to be using the GRBL millimeter option, and then simply click save, and we can move over to our machine. So we have our block of wood. We now need to consider how we hold this down to the bed. But not only how do we hold it down, how do we keep it in the exact same position every time we rotate it to guarantee it cuts in the same position? Well, let's talk about holding it down in the first place. Now, my usual method for holding material down is blue tape and CA glue. You put a double layer of this on, a bit of glue in between, and it holds everything down nice and secure. The problem is with this is it's actually quite a small base area versus the height of the material. So as it starts machining this top area, as you can see what's going on there, it will start to rock it and we run the risk of it coming loose. So for me in this scenario, blue tape and CA glue is not the best solution. We could consider using normal clamps to hold this in position, but we are going to be machining quite close to the ends, and this is also softwood as well, so we wouldn't want to put too much pressure on it in case it starts damaging the wood itself. So we're going to rule those out. So what other options are we left with? Well, if you are fortunate enough to own something like a low profile vise, this could be the solution for you. It can be dropped. You can find a way to make sure it always sits in the same spot and then just keep rotating it every turn. Now, there's a slight downside to this is these edges will get quite thin the more we machine out of it, so they may get a little bit soft and flexible when you start to clamp this in position. Let's take that out the way for now, and let's look at the other aspect of this. How do we keep it in the same position every time we need to rotate it? Well, one of the easiest ways to do this is just have something that is like a fixed holder like I have here, which just guarantees that every time it's in that position, it's always going to be in the same position every time it's rotated. Now, this was one that I made. There will be a link up in the corner, but ultimately just a scrap piece of wood screwed down will do exactly the same thing, just as a backstop and an end stop, to make sure that it has something to butt up to on at least 2 sides. So now let's talk about combining the two, repeatable position as well as holding it down in the position we actually need. My solution for today is I've got a scrap piece of wood here that was an offcut off the length of this. And what I'm simply going to do is actually put this in the corner of my end stop here. I'm going to screw that down, so ultimately that's going to be fixed in place. We've got a bit of the end stop sticking out there, and what I can then do is basically butt this up to that, butt it up to that, machine it, rotate it over, machine it, rotate it over, machine it, and so on to do all 4 sides. Now, the way that we can hold this down, because this is going to be fixed securely in place, we can actually clamp to that. So you can use something like a small Bessie clamp, or there are alternative versions, some are like quick grip. Just bring that in, push that right up to it, give it a few turns, and that will hold it in place. So we can machine that, as I say, loose it, rotate it, and continue to do the rest. And obviously you can put one on the other side as well to hold that in place. Now, do just be careful if you are clamping like this. Make sure you're using something as a little bit of a buffer on the other side just to protect the wood. So I'm going to drill a couple of holes in this now, get it screwed down, get it set up. The other thing that we need to factor in as well is finding the center of our material. The easiest way to do this is just draw 2 lines diagonally from corner to corner, and where they meet in the middle should be the center of your material. So we now have everything in place. We've got the solid piece of wood screwed down to basically be our anchor point for holding everything nice and secure. We've got the bit of plastic there just acting as the end stop to guarantee that it all sits in the same position every time we take it out and rotate it, to butt it straight back up to the exact same position. The next thing we need to do now is put the bit in the machine, bring it over and center it on top of this wood and set the 0. One extra tip: if you're trying to get in the exact center point like we are here, you can consider using something like a V bit first. Bring it over, set the V right on that cross, obviously reset the 0, bring it up, change the bit over to the one that you need to, put it back down, touch the surface, and again just reset the Z height then, and it should hold it in position. So everything is in position, we're about to start the job, but take a note of this tip because it will save you a lot of time. Before doing this, make sure you home your machine and then obviously get it into the position you need to start and reset the 0. Now before starting the job, type this command into your console box, G30.1, hit enter. G30.1, hit enter, and it will store this exact same position in your memory of the machine. So when we come to actually take this out later on and turn it around to get the machine to their exact same spot, obviously we can always click return to 0, but let's say we have to turn our machine off overnight. Well, all we simply do then is home the machine the next day once it is on, type G30 in, hit enter, and it will come back to that exact same spot. So it's G30.1 to set the position and simply G30 to always return to that position. So the first pocket has been machined out. Let's get this all tidied up and then I'll show you how to flip it around and do the same again. So what we're going to do now is just release the clamps, move this out of the way, just make sure there is no debris. I know you can't really see it from that camera angle, just make sure it is all clean so it can sit back flush. And then we're simply just going to rotate it round one side, put it back in the exact same position, bring the clamps back in, obviously make sure it does stay aligned, and tighten them back up. So material has been rotated, it is now secured down again. All we need to do is type G30 and hit enter, and it returns to the center or the 0 to start the job again. So I'll now continue to do this and machine the other 3 sides to give us our finished piece. Let me quickly talk to you about CNC with me. It's purely coincidence this is a golf ball sticker and we're doing a golf ball project today, but if you are a CNC enthusiast, this is definitely a platform you want to go and check out. There are weekly projects that come out with all of the files to get you going and just making life very easy, especially if you're trying to come up with ideas to make and to sell. So it's definitely worth checking out because you get a whole library of things to access. I'm one of the tutors over there along with a couple of great other people. We have things like monthly hangouts, live Q&As. As I say, it's just generally a great community to be a part of if you are a CNC enthusiast. Check out the links in the description area below, and the code JamesDeanDesigns will also get you 15% off. So that is all of the machining done. Let's release it. And all being well, that should be a pretty smooth transition on all inside edges, no lips, so that has come out nice. Now obviously if you do have any little steps in there, you can always sand them out if needed. But now the most important question I suppose we need to ask is, how do we get a golf ball to fit through that gap? Well, to do this we need to go and boil some water. Yes, you heard me correctly, boil some water, except we don't actually need it boiling, but we do want it to be pretty hot. Now whenever you apply heat and moisture to wood, it will make it softer and more flexible. So ultimately, by dropping this in some hot water for a few minutes, these thin edges will actually become malleable, and we should be able to then push the golf ball into that gap and get it inside the cage. So we're going to bring this up to a decent temperature, drop it in the water for a few minutes. Now just a few obviously safety tips: wear some gloves just to protect your hands because that will get very hot, and also wood does float in water, so you want something to actually hold it down below the water, otherwise it's just going to bob along on top. So yeah, let's get this in some hot water for a few minutes and see if we can get the golf ball in the middle. So that has been in there for a couple of minutes now. Let's take it out. You want to be very careful when you are doing this. You don't want to force it through the wood, so if it does feel like it's struggling, then maybe ease off, but let's see how this goes. Now that did take a little bit of pressure to get it in. It has left a slight mark there. What we can in theory do is drop this back in the water for a second and it should pop that mark out. So I'm just going to try and do that now very quickly. So that is the golf ball puzzle, golf ball cage finished off. The golf ball sits nicely in there, can move around with not too much room to actually get it back out, which is just what we want. Now obviously you want to let this dry. Definitely make sure you leave it at least till the next day to let some of the moisture go out of the wood that we just put in. In terms of finishing the wood off, you've got a couple of choices. You can just leave it as the natural wood. Obviously this is pine, but especially if you're using some harder woods as well, they can actually look quite nice just being left natural. You can also coat it it or stain it as well. Just be very careful though, obviously the golf ball is in there, so maybe stain one half, flip it over, stain the other half, or if you're going to try and stain it all, obviously do it, but just find a way to keep the golf ball clean. So I said at the start, these were really easy to make, and I wasn't kidding. Now don't make the same mistake I did and leave the water boiling in the workshop. It was genuinely like a sauna when I got back in here. My mistake, oops. Now the other thing to remember when making these is they are customizable. You can make them different lengths, you can put multiple balls inside them, you can even leave spaces on the top or the bottom to do things like engraving, just making them more sellable and more appealing. So yeah, I do hope you found this video useful. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and make sure you subscribe if not done so already. And also remember the links for CNC with me. As I say, great community, lots of resources to help you push on with your CNC journey. Thank you all very much for watching. Final thanks as always goes to my patrons, and I will see you all on the next episode.